The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered general store, and Hannah Ashford stepped down onto the dusty street of San Diego, California, clutching her mother's worn Bible so tightly her knuckles had turned white. It was August of 1872, and the afternoon sun blazed overhead with merciless intensity, making the fabric of her dark traveling dress cling uncomfortably to her back. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to meet a man she had never seen, carrying nothing but one small trunk, $23 sewn into her petticoat, and the faith that God would guide her steps into this strange new chapter of her life. The town was smaller than she had imagined, with wooden buildings lining a single main street that ran parallel to the distant shimmer of the Pacific Ocean. Dust devils spun lazily between the structures, and the air smelled of salt, horse sweat, and something she could not quite identify, something wild and untamed. Hannah took a steadying breath and looked around for the man who had promised in his letters to meet her arrival. Andrew Zimmerman, rancher, widower, 30 years old, seeking a God-fearing woman to be his wife and help him build a life of purpose and faith in the California territory. She saw him before he saw her. He stood near a hitching post, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore dusty work clothes, nothing fancy, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. His hands rested on his belt, and even from a distance, Hannah could see the nervous tension in his stance. He was scanning each passenger who disembarked, clearly searching for someone he would not recognize. Hannah smoothed her skirts and walked toward him, the Bible pressed against her chest like a shield. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone on the street could hear it. "Mr. Zimmerman." Her voice came out softer than she intended. He turned quickly, and she found herself looking into the bluest eyes she had ever seen, the color of the sky just after dawn. His face was weathered from years of outdoor work, with fine lines around his eyes and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, two strangers bound by letters and hope. "Miss Ashford." He removed his hat, revealing more of that wavy hair, and something in his expression softened. "I am Andrew Zimmerman. Welcome to San Diego." She noticed his gaze drop to the Bible in her hands, and she saw something shift in his eyes, something that looked almost like relief. "I know it might seem foolish," Hannah said quickly, feeling the need to explain. "Carrying it so openly, I mean. But it was my mother's, and she read to me from it every night before she passed. It has brought me comfort on this long journey, and I suppose I could not bear to pack it away where I could not reach it." Andrew's expression grew even gentler. He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sage. "It does not seem foolish at all, Miss Ashford. In fact, I cannot think of anything more fitting." He gestured toward the Bible with a work-roughened hand. "I wrote in my letters that I was seeking someone who shared my faith, someone who could help me build not just a ranch, but a life grounded in something greater than ourselves. Seeing you arrive clutching that Bible tells me everything I need to know about your character." Hannah felt warmth spread through her chest, easing some of the fear that had plagued her since leaving Boston. "I am glad to hear you say that, Mr. Zimmerman. I confess I have been terribly nervous about meeting you." "Andrew," he said. "Please call me Andrew. And I understand your nervousness. I have been standing here for the better part of an hour, wondering what I would say when you arrived, wondering if you would take one look at me and decide to get right back on that stage." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his serious face into something unexpectedly handsome. "I would never," Hannah said, surprised by her own certainty. "I made a promise and I intend to keep it. Besides, I believe God led me here for a reason." "Then we will build our faith together," Andrew said, and the simple declaration felt like a vow, like the beginning of something sacred and unbreakable. He collected her trunk from the stagecoach driver, handling the weight easily, and led her to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 bay horses. As he helped her onto the wooden seat, his hand was steady and warm through her glove, and she felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with nerves. "The ranch is about an hour's ride from town," Andrew explained as he climbed up beside her and took the reins. "It is not fancy, but the land is good, and the house is solid. I built most of it myself after I bought the property 3 years ago." "Tell me about it," Hannah said, eager to know more about the place that would become her home. As Andrew guided the horses out of town and onto a dusty road that wound through golden hills dotted with oak trees, he began to talk. His voice was deep and measured, the voice of a man who chose his words carefully. He told her about the 200 acres he had purchased with money saved from years of working on other men's ranches. He described the herd of cattle he was slowly building, the vegetable garden that struggled in the California heat, the creek that ran along the eastern boundary of his property. "I had a wife before," he said quietly, and Hannah heard the old pain in his voice. "Sarah. We were married for only 2 years when the fever took her. That was 3 years ago, and for a long time I could not imagine opening my heart again. But the loneliness became too heavy to bear, and I realized I did not want to build this ranch alone. I wanted to build it with someone, for a family." "I am sorry for your loss," Hannah said gently. "That must have been terribly difficult." "It was. But I have come to believe that God has a plan for each of us, even when we cannot see it clearly. Sarah's death taught me not to take a single day for granted, to cherish the blessings we are given." He glanced at her, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes. "I hope I have not made a mistake, asking you to come all this way. I hope I can be the husband you deserve." Hannah's throat tightened with emotion. "I left Boston because there was nothing left for me there. My parents are both gone, and my only brother moved to New York with his wife. I was working as a seamstress, living in a boarding house, and I felt as though my life was slipping away one day at a time. When I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, something in my heart told me to respond. I believe I am meant to be here, Andrew. I truly do." He reached over and briefly squeezed her hand, a gesture so full of warmth and promise that Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and she took in the strange new landscape around her. Everything was so different from Boston, so wild and open. The hills rolled endlessly under a sky so blue and vast it made her dizzy to look at it. Wildflowers bloomed in brilliant patches of orange and purple, and hawks circled overhead on invisible currents of air. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Andrew agreed. "Harsh sometimes, especially in summer when the rain stops, but beautiful. I think you will come to love it as I do." The ranch appeared gradually as they crested a hill, revealing a small valley with a creek running through it. The house was a simple wooden structure with a covered porch and a brick chimney. Nearby stood a barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals. Cattle grazed in the distance, and Hannah could see the neat rows of a vegetable garden behind the house. "Home," Andrew said, and there was pride in his voice. He helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk into the house. Inside, it was clean but sparse, with handmade furniture and windows that let in the afternoon light. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A bedroom opened off to one side, and Andrew gestured to it somewhat awkwardly. "That will be your room for now," he said. "I will sleep out here until we are properly married. I thought we could speak with the pastor in town this Sunday, see about arranging a ceremony." Hannah nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness. That sounds appropriate. Thank you for being considerate of my comfort. Of course. He set her trunk down just inside the bedroom door. I want you to feel safe here, Hannah. I want you to feel like this is truly your home. She looked around the simple room, taking in the quilt-covered bed, the washstand, the window that overlooked the garden. It was plain, but it was clean and bright, and something in her chest loosened. I already do, she said honestly. Over the next few days, Hannah began to settle into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn to help Andrew prepare breakfast, then spent her mornings tending the vegetable garden and caring for the chickens while he worked with the cattle. The heat was intense, unlike anything she had experienced in Boston, but she found herself adapting more quickly than she had expected. There was something deeply satisfying about the physical work, about seeing the direct results of her labor. In the evenings, after supper, they would sit together on the porch and read from the Bible. It had been Andrew's suggestion that first night, and it had quickly become Hannah's favorite part of the day. They would take turns reading passages aloud, then discuss what the words meant to them, how they could apply the teachings to their daily lives. These conversations revealed depths to Andrew that his letters had only hinted at. He was thoughtful and sincere in his faith, not performative or judgmental, but genuinely seeking to live according to his beliefs. My father was not a religious man, Andrew told her one evening as the sun set in brilliant streaks of orange and pink. He drank too much and had a fierce temper. But my mother, she had faith enough for all of us. She would gather us children around her every night and read from the Bible, just like you said your mother did. Those were the only peaceful moments in our household, the only times my father would quiet down and listen. When she died, I was only 14, and I felt as though the light had gone out of the world. I turned my back on God for a long time, angry that he had taken her from us. What changed? Hannah asked softly. Sarah, he said simply. When I met her, she reminded me so much of my mother, not in appearance, but in spirit. She had that same gentle strength, that same unwavering faith. She showed me that turning away from God in my pain was only making me more lost, not less. We started reading the Bible together, attending church services whenever we could. For the first time since my mother's death, I felt at peace. And when Sarah died, I was devastated, but I did not turn away from my faith this time. I held on to it even harder, because I knew it was the only thing that could carry me through the grief. Hannah reached over and took his hand, and he laced his fingers through hers. They sat like that as the stars began to appear, connected by grief and hope and the fragile beginnings of something deeper. Sunday came, and they rode into town together for church services. The building was small and plain, filled with ranchers, merchants, and their families. The pastor, a kind-faced man named Reverend Thomas, welcomed Hannah warmly and seemed delighted when Andrew asked about arranging a wedding ceremony. "How about next Sunday?" the Reverend suggested. "That will give folks time to hear the news and attend if they wish." A wedding is always a cause for celebration in a community like ours. Hannah and Andrew agreed, and the date was set. As they left the church, several women approached Hannah, introducing themselves and offering to help with preparations. Their warmth surprised her, this ready acceptance into a community of strangers. In Boston, people had been more reserved, more formal. Here, there seemed to be an understanding that everyone needed each other to survive, and that created a different kind of bond. The week leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Hannah sewed herself a new dress from fabric she had brought from Boston, a simple design in pale blue that made her gray eyes look almost silver. The ranch women brought food for a small celebration after the ceremony, refusing to let Hannah help with the cooking. You just focus on being a beautiful bride," said Clara Martinez, the wife of a neighboring rancher. "We will take care of everything else." The night before the wedding, Hannah sat alone in her room, her mother's Bible open on her lap. She read the familiar verses about love and commitment, and she thought about the journey that had brought her here. A month ago, she had been in Boston, lonely and uncertain about her future. Now she was about to marry a good man, a man who shared her faith and her hope for building something meaningful. It was not the romantic story she had dreamed about as a girl, but it felt real and solid in a way those girlish dreams never had. A soft knock came at her door. "Hannah, may I speak with you for a moment?" She opened the door to find Andrew standing there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I just wanted to give you something before tomorrow." He held out a small wooden box, clearly handmade, with delicate carvings of flowers on the lid. "I am not much of a craftsman, but I wanted you to have something special, something to mark this occasion." Hannah opened the box and gasped. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, was a simple gold ring. "Andrew, this is beautiful." "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "The only thing of value she ever owned. My father sold everything else after she died, but I managed to hide this ring. I gave it to Sarah when we married, and after she passed, I put it away, thinking I would never use it again. But I want you to have it now. I want you to wear it as a symbol of the new life we are building together." Tears blurred Hannah's vision as she looked up at him. "Are you certain? This is such a precious keepsake." "I am certain. My mother would have wanted it to be worn by someone who would cherish it, someone who would honor what it represents." He took her hand gently. "Tomorrow, when we stand before Reverend Thomas and make our vows, I want you to know that I am not entering into this marriage lightly. I know we barely know each other, and I know this arrangement might seem cold and practical to outsiders. But I believe God brought you here for a reason, Hannah. I believe we can build something real and lasting together." "I believe that too," Hannah whispered. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "Sleep well. Tomorrow begins our new life." The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Hannah dressed carefully in her new blue dress, arranging her dark hair in a simple style. She had no family to stand with her, no one to give her away, but somehow that did not seem to matter. When she stepped out of the bedroom, Andrew was waiting for her, dressed in clean clothes, his hair neatly combed. The look in his eyes when he saw her made her blush. "You are beautiful," he said simply. They rode to town together, and the small church was already filling with people. Hannah recognized the faces of the women who had helped with preparations, and their warm smiles gave her courage. Reverend Thomas stood at the front of the church, his Bible open, waiting to join their lives together. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They stood before the congregation and spoke their vows, promising to love and cherish each other, to remain faithful through whatever trials might come. When Andrew slipped his mother's ring onto Hannah's finger, his hands were steady, but she could see emotion shining in his eyes. And when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Andrew kissed her for the first time, Hannah felt something shift deep in her soul, a recognition that her life had irrevocably changed in the best possible way. The celebration afterward was joyful and boisterous. The church women had prepared a feast, and someone produced a fiddle, filling the afternoon with lively music. Hannah danced with Andrew, laughing as he admitted he had no skill for it, and she was surprised by how natural it felt to be in his arms, to move with him, to share in this simple happiness. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and rode back to the ranch as husband and wife. The evening air was cool and sweet, and Hannah felt a nervous flutter in her stomach as the house came into view. This was her wedding night, and while Andrew had been nothing but respectful and kind, she knew their relationship was about to enter new territory. Inside the house, Andrew lit the lamps and turned to face her. "Hannah, I want you to know that there is no rush for anything. We have our whole lives ahead of us. If you need time to feel comfortable, I will wait as long as you need." His consideration moved her deeply. She stepped closer to him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his blue eyes. "I am your wife now, Andrew. I want to be your wife in every sense of the word." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms. "I will do my best to be worthy of you." "You already are," she said, and then his lips were on hers, and all her nervousness melted away in the warmth of his embrace. That night, in the privacy of the bedroom they now shared, Hannah discovered a tenderness in Andrew that took her breath away. He was patient and careful with her, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt like the natural culmination of everything that had been building between them since the moment she stepped off that stagecoach. Afterward, lying in his arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, Hannah said a silent prayer of thanks for the path that had led her here. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work and small discoveries. Hannah learned the rhythms of ranch life, mastering skills she had never needed in Boston. She learned to milk the cow Andrew purchased from a neighbor, to preserve vegetables for the coming winter, to mend the endless tears in work clothes. Her hands, once soft and pale, grew rough and tanned from the sun. But more than the physical changes, she felt herself growing in other ways. The vast openness of California no longer intimidated her, but filled her with a sense of freedom she had never known. She discovered a strength in herself she had not known existed, a resilience that came from meeting each day's challenges head-on, and she fell in love with her husband. It happened gradually, in 100 small moments. The way Andrew always made sure she had enough water when they worked outside in the heat. The way he listened intently when she shared her thoughts about the Bible passages they read together. The way he would sometimes stop whatever he was doing just to watch her, a soft smile on his face. The way he held her at night, as though she was something precious and irreplaceable. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Andrew said, "I need to tell you something." Hannah looked up from the sewing in her lap, noting the serious tone in his voice. "What is it? When you first arrived, I thought this marriage would be a partnership, a practical arrangement that would benefit us both. I hoped we might become friends, that we could build a life of mutual respect and shared faith." He turned to face her fully, and she saw vulnerability in his expression. "But what I feel for you now goes far beyond that. Hannah, I have fallen in love with you, deeply, completely in love with you, and I needed you to know." Joy bloomed in Hannah's chest, so intense it almost hurt. "Oh, Andrew, I love you too. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day when you said we would build our faith together. You have given me a home, a purpose, a life filled with more meaning than I ever thought possible." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and she felt the thunder of his heartbeat against her cheek. "I thank God for you every single day," he murmured into her hair, "for bringing you into my life, for giving me a second chance at happiness." They sat like that as the sky darkened, and the first stars appeared, wrapped in each other's arms, bound by love and faith and the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. As winter approached, they fell into an even deeper contentment. The work was hard, especially when the rains came and turned the roads to mud, but they faced each challenge together. They attended church every Sunday, becoming pillars of the small community. They read the Bible together every night, their discussions growing richer as they learned to be completely honest with each other about their doubts and struggles as well as their certainties. In December, Hannah began to suspect she might be carrying a child. She waited to say anything, wanting to be certain, but when Christmas came and went and her suspicions proved true, she could barely contain her excitement. She chose to tell Andrew on a Sunday evening after they had finished their Bible reading. "Andrew, I have something wonderful to share with you," she said, taking his hands in hers. He looked at her expectantly, a smile already forming on his lips. "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, he simply stared at her as though unable to process the words. Then a look of pure joy spread across his face, transforming him. "Truly, Hannah, truly, truly," she laughed, and then she was in his arms, both of them laughing and crying at once. "A baby," he kept repeating, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." That night, as they lay in bed, Andrew's hand rested protectively on Hannah's still flat stomach. "I cannot believe how blessed I am," he said quietly. "A beautiful wife who loves me, a child on the way, a life filled with purpose and faith. 2 years ago I was alone and grieving, unable to imagine ever being happy again. And now look at what God has given me." "Given us," Hannah corrected gently. "This is our blessing, our family." "Our family," he repeated, and she heard the smile in his voice. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat made it challenging. Hannah continued to work as much as she could, though Andrew grew increasingly protective, always trying to get her to rest more. The ranch women rallied around her, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, sharing their own stories of childbirth in this rugged country where the nearest doctor was hours away. In early August, almost exactly a year after Hannah had first arrived in San Diego, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Clara Martinez and 2 other experienced ranch wives. Andrew paced outside the bedroom door, praying desperately, terrified of losing Hannah the way he had lost Sarah. But when the baby's first cry pierced the air, and Clara opened the door with a huge smile on her face, saying, "You have a healthy son, Andrew, and your wife is just fine," he felt his knees go weak with relief and gratitude. Hannah lay in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth. When Andrew entered the room, she smiled up at him. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small red face of his child. The baby had wisps of light brown hair and was making small mewling sounds, his tiny fists waving in the air. Andrew reached out and gently touched one of those impossibly small hands, and the baby's fingers immediately curled around his thumb, gripping with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Andrew whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, Andrew said, "What about Isaac?" "It means he will laugh, and I feel like my heart could burst with joy right now." "Isaac," Hannah repeated, testing the name. "Isaac Zimmerman, I love it." Andrew leaned down and kissed her forehead, then her lips. "Thank you. Thank you for this incredible gift, for making me a father, for building this beautiful life with me." "We built it together," Hannah reminded him, echoing the words he had spoken to her that first day. "Always together." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Isaac was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Andrew proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Isaac when he cried at night, singing to him in his deep, slightly off-key voice, watching him with an expression of such love and wonder that it made Hannah's heart ache. On Sundays, they would take Isaac to church, and the whole congregation delighted in watching him grow. Reverend Thomas baptized him in front of the entire community, and Hannah and Andrew stood together, their son in Andrew's arms, and renewed their commitment to raising their child in faith and love. "This is what it is all about," Andrew said later that day as they sat on the porch with Isaac sleeping in Hannah's arms. "Family, faith, the simple blessings of each day. I spent so many years searching for meaning, for purpose, and here it is, right here in this moment." Hannah looked at her husband, at the lines around his eyes that came from squinting in the sun, at his work-roughened hands, at the quiet strength in his face, and she thought about how far they had both come. She thought about the scared young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach clutching her mother's Bible, hoping she had not made a terrible mistake. She thought about the lonely widower who had placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper, taking a leap of faith that God would send him the right person. "We were both so lost when we found each other," she said softly, "but I think that was part of God's plan. We had to know loneliness to truly appreciate what we have now. We had to know sorrow to recognize joy." Andrew reached over and took her free hand, bringing it to his lips. "You are the wisest person I know, Hannah Zimmerman, and the strongest and the kindest and the most beautiful." She laughed. "You are biased." "Absolutely," he agreed with a grin, "but that does not make it any less true." As Isaac grew from a baby into a toddler, the ranch prospered. Andrew's careful management and hard work paid off, and the herd grew larger each year. They were able to hire a young man named Tom to help with the heavy work, giving Andrew more time to spend with his family. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. The church community remained central to their lives. They hosted Bible study groups at the ranch, opening their home to neighbors who wanted to deepen their faith. Hannah started a Sunday school class for children, teaching them Bible stories and helping them memorize verses. Andrew served on the church council, helping to make decisions about the community's spiritual needs. When Isaac was 3 years old, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less surprise but equal joy. Isaac was delighted at the prospect of a sibling, though he did not fully understand what it meant. He would pat Hannah's growing belly and babble to the baby in his own toddler language, making both his parents laugh. In the spring of 1876, their daughter was born. The labor was shorter this time, and Clara Martinez once again attended, along with 2 other women from the church. When Andrew met his daughter for the first time, he wept openly, overwhelmed by the blessing of this second child. They named her Grace, after the grace of God that had brought them together and sustained them through every trial. She was a tiny, delicate baby with Andrew's blue eyes and a head full of dark curls. Isaac was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her and help take care of her, and Hannah's heart swelled watching Andrew teach their son how to be gentle, how to support the baby's head, how to rock her when she fussed. "2 children," Andrew said one night after the children were both asleep. He and Hannah sat on the porch as they did most evenings, enjoying the cool night air. "A son and a daughter. I feel like the richest man in the world." "We are blessed beyond measure," Hannah agreed. She leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You ever think about that day when you first arrived?" he asked. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had decided not to answer my advertisement?" "Sometimes," Hannah admitted. "But I try not to dwell on what might have been. I prefer to focus on what is, on the beautiful life we have built together." "Together," Andrew repeated, that word that had become almost sacred between them. "Always together." The years rolled by with the steady rhythm of ranch life and the changing seasons. Isaac grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved helping his father with the cattle and learning to ride the gentle mare Andrew bought for him. Grace was quieter, more contemplative, but she had a sweet nature that endeared her to everyone she met. Both children grew up steeped in faith, with Bible stories as familiar to them as nursery rhymes, with Sunday church services and evening prayers as natural as breathing. In 1878, when a drought struck the region and many ranchers struggled, Andrew and Hannah opened their home to families in need. They shared what they had, trusting that God would provide, and somehow they always had enough. The generosity they showed during those hard months was not forgotten, and it deepened their bonds with the community. When the rains finally returned and the land greened again, Reverend Thomas asked Andrew to give a testimony during Sunday service about how faith had sustained them through the drought. Andrew stood before the congregation, holding Hannah's hand, and spoke from the heart about trust, about community, about how God worked through people willing to open their hands and their hearts to those in need. "My wife taught me that faith is not just something we profess on Sundays," Andrew said, his voice carrying through the small church. "It is something we live every single day, in every choice we make, in how we treat our neighbors, and how we face adversity." When the drought came, Hannah never once suggested we stop helping others to preserve what we had. She said, "We give because we have been given to. We love because we have been loved, and we trust that God will not abandon us," and He did not. Hannah felt tears on her cheeks as she listened to her husband speak. She thought about the journey they had walked together, about how two strangers had become partners, then friends, then lovers, then parents, building a life of purpose and meaning one day at a time. After the service, as they walked to their wagon with Isaac and Grace running ahead, Andrew said, "I meant every word in there. You have made me a better man, Hannah. You have shown me what it truly means to live by faith." "We have made each other better," Hannah replied. "That is what love does. It challenges us to grow, to become the best versions of ourselves." That night, after the children were in bed, they sat on the porch with their Bibles as they had done countless times before. But this time, Andrew had a suggestion. "I have been thinking about starting a tradition," he said. "Every year on the anniversary of the day you arrived in San Diego, I want us to take time to reflect on how far we have come, to count our blessings, to renew our commitment to each other and to our faith. What do you think?" Hannah smiled. "I think it is a beautiful idea." So each August, they would wake before dawn and ride out to a favorite spot on their property, a small hill that overlooked the valley. They would watch the sunrise together and take turns sharing what they were grateful for, what they had learned over the past year, how they wanted to grow in the year to come. Then they would pray together, asking God to continue guiding their steps and blessing their family. It became one of Hannah's most cherished traditions, those quiet morning hours alone with Andrew, reflecting on the grace that had brought them together and sustained them through every season of life. When Isaac was 8 and Grace was 5, Hannah discovered she was pregnant for a third time. The pregnancy came as a surprise, as they had assumed their family was complete, but it was a welcome one. This time, Hannah was older and the pregnancy was more difficult. She tired easily and suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the 4th month. Andrew was attentive and worried, making sure she rested, taking on more of the household chores himself, enlisting Isaac's help with tasks the boy was old enough to handle. The church women once again rallied around her, bringing meals and watching the children when Hannah needed to rest. In February of 1881, their second son was born. The labor was long and frightening, with complications that left Hannah weak and the baby struggling to breathe. For hours, It was uncertain whether either of them would survive. Andrew stayed by Hannah's side, praying with an intensity that bordered on desperation, while Reverend Thomas sat in the next room with Isaac and Grace, keeping the frightened children calm. But as dawn broke, the baby's breathing steadied, and Hannah's bleeding slowed and then stopped. Clara, who had attended all 3 births, emerged from the bedroom with tears on her weathered face. "They are both going to be fine," she told Andrew. "It was close, closer than I would have liked, but they are going to be fine." Andrew nearly collapsed with relief. When he was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found Hannah propped up on pillows, pale and exhausted but smiling, holding their tiny son. "He is a fighter," Hannah said softly, "just like his father." "What should we name a fighter?" Andrew asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. They looked at their newborn son, so small and fragile but already showing such determination to live, and Hannah said, "Samuel. It means God has heard, because God heard our prayers and spared us both." Andrew's eyes filled with tears. "Samuel, yes, Samuel Zimmerman, our miracle." The recovery was slow. Hannah regained her strength gradually, and it was many weeks before she felt like herself again. Andrew was patient and supportive, taking on even more responsibilities to give her time to heal. Isaac and Grace were wonderful with their baby brother, eager to help in any way they could. When Samuel was finally strong enough to be taken to church, Reverend Thomas spoke about the power of prayer and the mercy of God, using Samuel's survival as an example of how faith could sustain people through even the darkest moments. The whole congregation gathered around the Zimmerman family, laying hands on them and offering prayers of thanksgiving. Afterward, as they stood outside the church in the spring sunshine, Andrew held Samuel while Hannah stood beside him with Isaac and Grace. They were surrounded by friends and neighbors, part of a community knit together by shared faith and mutual care. "This is home," Hannah said softly, looking around at the familiar faces. "Not just the ranch, but these people, this community, this life we have built together." Andrew looked down at her, love shining in his eyes. "You brought me back to life, Hannah. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. But you showed me how to truly live again, how to open my heart, how to trust in God's plan even when I could not see the way forward." "We saved each other," Hannah said. "That is what I believe. We were both lost, and we found each other, and we built something beautiful from our brokenness." Isaac tugged on Andrew's sleeve. "Papa, can we go home now? I am hungry." Everyone laughed, and the serious moment passed, but the truth of Hannah's words lingered in Andrew's heart. The years continued to unfold, bringing both joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. When Isaac was 12, he fell from a horse and broke his arm. When Grace was 7, she came down with a terrible fever that had them all frightened, but she recovered fully. When Samuel was 4, a drought returned to the region, though not as severe as the one before. Through it all, Hannah and Andrew faced each trial together, their faith and their love for each other growing stronger with each passing year. They continued their traditions, the evening Bible readings, the Sunday church services, the annual sunrise vigil on the anniversary of Hannah's arrival. These rhythms gave their lives structure and meaning, anchoring them when storms came. In 1885, when Isaac was 14, he came to his parents with a serious expression and announced that he wanted to be baptized. He had been attending Sunday school and Bible study his whole life, but now he wanted to make a public declaration of his own faith, separate from his parents' beliefs. Andrew and Hannah were both deeply moved. They spent long hours talking with Isaac about what it meant to commit his life to God, making sure he understood the gravity of what he was undertaking. But it was clear that the boy had thought deeply about his decision, that this was not just something he was doing to please his parents but a genuine conviction of his heart. On the day of Isaac's baptism, the church was packed with people who had watched the boy grow up. Reverend Thomas spoke about the importance of each person choosing faith for themselves, about how God had no grandchildren, only children. Isaac stood before the congregation and spoke about how his parents had taught him about God's love through their own example, through the way they treated each other and their neighbors, through their generosity and kindness and unwavering faith. Hannah wept as she watched her son being baptized, and when she looked at Andrew, she saw tears streaming down his face as well. Later, at the celebration at their ranch, surrounded by friends and family, Andrew pulled Hannah aside. "This is what it was all for," he said quietly. "All the prayers, all the Bible readings, all the times we tried to model what it means to live by faith. To see our son choose this path for himself, to know that we helped plant these seeds in his heart, there is no greater reward. He is going to be a good man," Hannah said. "Just like his father." "Because of you," Andrew replied, "because you brought faith and love into this house and made it a home." Grace was baptized 2 years later, and Samuel when he turned 12. Each time, Hannah and Andrew felt the same overwhelming gratitude, the same sense that they had succeeded in the most important task they had been given, raising their children to know and love God. As the children grew older and more independent, Hannah and Andrew found themselves with more time alone together. They took long walks around the ranch in the evenings, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. They traveled to San Francisco for their 20th wedding anniversary, staying in a hotel and dining in restaurants, marveling at how much the world had changed since they had first met. But they were always glad to return home, to the ranch and the life they had built. The simplicity of it, the rhythm of work and worship and family, suited them both far more than any city excitement could. In 1892, when Isaac was 21, he announced that he had been courting a young woman from a neighboring ranch and wanted to marry her. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was a sweet, capable girl with a strong faith and a good head for ranch management. Andrew and Hannah welcomed her into the family with open arms, grateful that their son had found someone who shared his values. The wedding was held in the same small church where Hannah and Andrew had been married 20 years earlier. As Hannah watched Isaac and Elizabeth exchange vows, she thought about how life came full circle, how the blessings they had received were now being passed down to the next generation. "He is going to be happy," Andrew whispered to her during the ceremony. "Yes," Hannah agreed. "He has chosen well." Isaac and Elizabeth built a small house on the far end of the ranch property, and Isaac began taking on more and more of the daily ranch operations, allowing Andrew to slow down a bit. It was a natural transition, and Andrew was grateful for it. His body was not as young as it used to be, and the hard physical labor was becoming more difficult. When Isaac and Elizabeth's first child was born in 1893, a daughter they named Mary, Hannah became a grandmother. She held her granddaughter and marveled at the passage of time, at how quickly the years had flown by. It seemed like just yesterday she had been holding Isaac as a newborn, and now here he was, a father himself. "Life moves so fast," she said to Andrew that night. "I wish I could slow it down, savor each moment a little longer." "But that is what makes it precious," Andrew replied. "Knowing that our time is limited makes us appreciate it more, and look at everything we have experienced, everything we have built. We have lived a good life, Hannah, a full life." "We have," she agreed, snuggling closer to him. "No regrets." "No regrets," he echoed. Grace married a year later, wedding a young man from town who worked at the general store. His name was William, and he was hardworking and kind, with a quiet strength that reminded Hannah of Andrew. Grace and William moved into town, where William managed the store and Grace started a small dressmaking business, putting to use the sewing skills Hannah had taught her. Samuel, the youngest, showed an interest in becoming a pastor. He studied under Reverend Thomas, who was now quite elderly, learning about theology and scripture, practicing his preaching on patient family members. Hannah was proud of all her children, but there was something particularly moving about seeing her youngest son called to ministry. In 1895, Reverend Thomas retired, and the congregation voted unanimously to hire Samuel as their new pastor, despite his youth. At 24, he was young for such a position, but he had grown up in the church, had been mentored by a wise and godly man, and had a genuine calling that was evident to everyone who knew him. Andrew and Hannah sat in the front pew on Samuel's first Sunday as pastor, bursting with pride as their son delivered his sermon. He spoke about faith as a journey, about how we are all travelers on a path toward God, and how important it is to walk alongside each other, supporting and encouraging one another along the way. "My parents taught me that faith is not meant to be lived in isolation," Samuel said, looking directly at Hannah and Andrew. "They showed me that we grow in our relationship with God through our relationships with each other." They built their marriage on a foundation of faith, and they built their family on that same foundation. And because of that, I stand before you today, called to serve this community as your pastor. After the service, people lined up to congratulate Samuel and to thank Andrew and Hannah for raising such a fine young man. It was overwhelming and humbling, and as they drove home that afternoon, Hannah leaned against Andrew's shoulder and said, "We did it. We raised 3 good children who love God and are making their own way in the world. We succeeded." "We did," Andrew agreed. "And now we get to watch them build their own lives, make their own families, carry forward the legacy we started." The next few years were peaceful and full. Mary was joined by 2 brothers, making Isaac and Elizabeth the parents of 3. Grace had twin boys who were bundles of energy and mischief. Samuel married a lovely young woman named Ruth, who shared his calling to ministry. The ranch continued to prosper under Isaac's management, and Andrew was able to truly retire, spending his days doing lighter work and enjoying his grandchildren. Hannah's health began to decline when she was in her early 50s. It started small, with increased fatigue and occasional pain in her joints, but gradually it became clear that something more serious was wrong. The doctor in town could not identify the exact problem, but he confirmed that her body was simply wearing out, the years of hard work and multiple pregnancies taking their toll. Andrew was devastated. He hovered over Hannah constantly, trying to make her comfortable, doing anything and everything he could think of to ease her pain. But Hannah faced her declining health with the same faith that had guided her entire life. "We all have an appointed time," she told Andrew when he became particularly despondent. "I am not afraid of dying, my love. I know where I am going, and I know I will see you again someday. My only sorrow is leaving you." "Do not talk like that," Andrew said, his voice breaking. "You are going to be fine. You have to be fine. I cannot lose you, Hannah. I cannot." She took his hand and held it against her cheek. "You are not going to lose me. Even when I am gone from this earth, I will still be with you, in your memories, in our children, in everything we built together." Love does not end with death, Andrew. It goes on forever. For several more years, Hannah managed to maintain a relatively normal life, though she tired more easily and had to give up many of her regular activities. She could no longer work in the garden or attend every church service, But she still read the Bible with Andrew every evening, still celebrated holidays and birthdays with her growing family, still found joy in each day. In the spring of 1903, Hannah became seriously ill. She took to her bed and did not have the strength to rise. The children gathered at the ranch, bringing their own children, filling the house with family. Samuel, now an established pastor with a reputation for wisdom beyond his years, led prayers at his mother's bedside. Grace sat for hours reading aloud from the Bible. Isaac made sure his father ate and slept, taking care of him the way Andrew had once taken care of him. One afternoon, when it was just Hannah and Andrew alone in the room, she said, "Do you remember what you told me the day I arrived? You said we would build our faith together." "I remember," Andrew said, his voice thick with tears. "I remember everything about that day. We did build it together, did we not? Not just faith, but a whole life. A beautiful, meaningful life. The best life I could have imagined," Andrew said. "You gave me everything, Hannah. Purpose, love, family, hope. You saved me from my grief and loneliness and showed me how to truly live." "And you gave me a home," Hannah replied. "Not just a physical place, but a home in your heart." "I was so scared that day I stepped off the stagecoach, but you made me feel safe and cherished and valued. You built our faith together with me, just like you promised." Andrew leaned down and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end of my days and beyond." "I love you too," Hannah whispered. "Always and forever." She slipped away peacefully 2 days later, surrounded by her family, with Andrew holding her hand and Samuel reading the 23rd Psalm. Even in the midst of profound grief, there was a sense of peace in the room, a knowledge that Hannah's faith had carried her safely home. The funeral was held in the church where Samuel now served as pastor, the same church where Hannah and Andrew had been married, where their children had been baptized, where they had worshipped for more than 30 years. It seemed like the entire county turned out to pay their respects, testament to the impact Hannah had made on her community through decades of kindness, generosity, and faithful living. Samuel delivered the eulogy, speaking about his mother's unwavering faith, her gentle strength, her capacity for love. "My mother used to say that faith was not just something we believed, but something we lived," he said. "And she lived her faith every single day of her life. In how she loved my father, in how she raised us children, in how she treated neighbors and strangers alike. She showed us what it means to truly follow God, and her legacy will continue in all of us who were blessed to know her." After Hannah's death, Andrew struggled. For the first time in more than 30 years, he was alone. The house felt empty and silent without her presence. He tried to maintain their routines, reading from the Bible each evening, but it was not the same without Hannah there to discuss the passages with him, to offer her insights and perspectives. His children worried about him. Isaac urged him to move into their house, but Andrew refused. "This is my home," he said. "This is where I built my life with your mother, and I am not leaving it." Samuel visited almost daily, sitting with his father, praying with him, helping him process his grief. "Mother would not want you to stop living," Samuel said gently. "She would want you to find joy again, to continue the life you built together." "I know," Andrew said, "but right now I just miss her. I miss her so much it feels like a physical pain." "That is because you loved her well," Samuel replied, "and she loved you. That kind of love never really ends, Father. It transforms, but it does not end." Slowly, painfully, Andrew began to heal. He threw himself into being a grandfather, spending time with his grandchildren, teaching them to ride and rope and care for cattle. He attended church every Sunday, sitting in the same pew he had shared with Hannah, feeling her presence beside him even though she was gone. He continued the tradition of going to their special hillside each August on the anniversary of Hannah's arrival, though now he went alone, watching the sunrise and talking to her as though she could hear him. "I miss you," he would say. "Every single day I miss you. But I am trying to live the way you would want me to, trying to find joy and purpose, trying to be a good father and grandfather. I hope I am making you proud." He imagined he could hear her response, that gentle voice telling him she was always proud of him, that she was waiting for him, that their separation was only temporary. 2 years after Hannah's death, a widow from the church began bringing Andrew meals, checking on him, making sure he was taking care of himself. Her name was Margaret, and she was a kind woman whose husband had died a few years earlier. Andrew appreciated her kindness, but he made it clear that his heart still belonged to Hannah, that he was not looking for romance. "I understand," Margaret said. "I feel the same way about my late husband. But that does not mean we cannot be friends, that we cannot help each other through the loneliness." So they became friends, two people who understood grief and loss, who could sit together in comfortable silence or talk about their departed spouses without judgment or jealousy. It helped ease Andrew's loneliness, though he never stopped missing Hannah. In 1910, when Andrew was 68 years old, his health began to fail. Like Hannah before him, he faced the prospect of death with faith and acceptance. His children gathered around him, along with his many grandchildren, filling his last days with love and laughter. On a warm August evening, exactly 38 years after Hannah had first arrived in San Diego, Andrew lay in his bed with his family around him. Samuel sat beside him, holding his hand, while Isaac and Grace stood nearby with their own families. "I am ready," Andrew said, his voice weak but peaceful. "I have lived a good life, a blessed life. I got to love an incredible woman, raise wonderful children, see my grandchildren grow. I have no regrets." "We love you, Father," Isaac said, tears streaming down his face. "And I love all of you," Andrew replied. "Take care of each other, keep the faith. Build your lives on the foundation of love and trust in God, just like your mother and I did." As the sun set and darkness fell, Andrew Zimmerman drew his last breath, a small smile on his face, his hand in his son's, and those who were present swore they heard him whisper one final word: "Hannah." Samuel conducted his father's funeral, though he could barely speak through his tears. He laid his parents to rest side by side in the church cemetery, under a simple headstone that read, "Andrew and Hannah Zimmerman. They built their faith together." At the gathering after the funeral, as 3 generations of families shared memories and celebrated the lives of Andrew and Hannah, Isaac stood and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, "who showed us what it means to truly love, to truly have faith, to truly build a life of meaning and purpose. They started with nothing but hope and a shared belief that God had brought them together. And look at what they created. Not just a ranch or a family, but a legacy of faith and love that will continue through all of us and our children and our children's children. We are all here because 2 strangers took a chance on each other, because a mail-order bride arrived clutching a Bible and a rancher said, 'Then we will build our faith together.' And build they did. A life, a family, a legacy that will never be forgotten." Everyone raised their glasses, and through the tears and the grief, there was also joy, gratitude for the example Andrew and Hannah had set, for the love they had shared, for the faith they had built together. Years later, when Samuel was an old man himself, he would tell his own grandchildren about Andrew and Hannah, about how their love story began with a leap of faith and grew into something beautiful and enduring. He would pull out the worn Bible that had belonged to Hannah's mother, the same Bible she had clutched when she first arrived in San Diego, and he would read from it the way she had read to him when he was a child. "Your great-grandparents taught me that faith is not just about believing," Samuel would say. "It is about acting on that belief, about trusting that God will guide us even when we cannot see the path ahead. Your great-grandmother left everything she knew to come to a strange place and marry a stranger. Your great-grandfather opened his heart to love again after losing his first wife. They both took enormous risks, but they did it with faith, and they built something incredible together." The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down from Isaac to his children and then to their children. The small church where Andrew and Hannah had worshipped eventually grew into a larger congregation. But Samuel's successors always made sure to tell the story of the couple who had been pillars of that community, who had lived their faith so authentically that they had inspired everyone around them. And on warm August evenings, when the sunset painted the California hills in shades of orange and gold, you could still find members of the Zimmerman family gathered on that special hillside, watching the sun go down and remembering the legacy of Andrew and Hannah, two people who had built their faith together, and in doing so, had built something eternal. Their story became legend in San Diego, passed down through the generations as an example of what love and faith could create. The Bible that Hannah had carried off that stagecoach was preserved and eventually donated to the church, where it was displayed in a special case with a plaque that read, "This Bible belonged to Hannah Ashford Zimmerman, who arrived in San Diego clutching it in 1872. She and her husband Andrew built their faith together, and their legacy continues in this community." Couples who were struggling in their marriages would sometimes visit the church to see the Bible and read the story of Andrew and Hannah, finding hope in the knowledge that love could overcome loneliness and fear, that faith could carry people through the hardest times. The cemetery where they were buried became a place of pilgrimage for romantics and believers, people who wanted to pay their respects to a couple who had truly understood what it meant to build a life on a foundation of faith and love. The last living person who had known Andrew and Hannah personally was their granddaughter Mary, Isaac's oldest child. She lived to be 97 years old, and she never tired of telling stories about her grandparents. She would describe how they looked at each other, even after decades of marriage, with such tenderness and devotion that it made everyone around them believe in true love. She would talk about the evening Bible readings, about how her grandfather's voice would grow soft and reverent when he read, about how her grandmother would always have some insight that made the passages come alive. They were ordinary people, Mary would say. They worked hard, struggled sometimes, faced all the normal challenges of life. But they faced everything together with faith, and that made them extraordinary. They showed me that the secret to a good life is not avoiding hardship, but facing it with someone you love, someone who shares your values and your commitment to something greater than yourselves. When Mary finally passed away in 1976, more than a century after Hannah had first arrived in San Diego, she was buried in the family plot near her grandparents. And the story of Andrew and Hannah Zimmerman continued to be told, a testament to the power of faith, the strength of love, and the beauty of two people building a life together, one day at a time, one sunrise at a time, one prayer at a time. In the end, that was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the family or the church involvement, but the simple truth that love and faith, combined and nurtured and protected, could create something that transcended death, something that would ripple through generations, inspiring others to take their own leaps of faith, to open their own hearts, to build their own lives on foundations of love and trust in God. The mail-order bride who had arrived clutching a Bible and the rancher who had said they would build their faith together had done exactly that. And in doing so, they had built something eternal, something that would never be forgotten, something that would continue to inspire and encourage long after they had both gone home to the God they had served so faithfully. Their story was complete, their ending was peaceful, and their love story had become the stuff of legend, a beautiful reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of faith.